And incidentally, some of you may have read about what just went bust in Las Vegas. They had a 65-acre little mini city they were building. Now, if that isn't a bubble project, I don't know what is. This is obviously not a sustainable, sensible free market project. That's only going to go on as long as the monetary spigot keeps flowing. So sure enough, we have cities where there are none to inhabit going bust. And let me point out, by the way, that when the monetary authority pours money into the economy through the banking system to lower interest rates, some people think, well, this encourages economic growth. No, it doesn't. What it does is it distorts the path that capital would normally take. So that normally the free market would say, no, you are not going to build a 65-acre little private city. That is just not going to happen. The resources don't exist for it. The demand doesn't exist for it. But when money is artificially cheap, crazy projects get to bid for capital at the same table with normal projects. And so all through the boom, the phony prosperity that we're seeing, what's actually happening is crazy projects are diverting wealth from normal projects that cater to real human needs, not phony, baloney, crazy needs like the 65-acre city. Now, but here's the quotation that gets really to the heart of the Austrian view. He says, and again, this is 1837. What has been, whatever must be, the consequences of such a sudden and prodigious inflation of the currency? Business stimulated to the most unhealthy activity. A vast amount of overproduction in the mechanic arts. A vast amount of speculation in property of every kind and name at fictitious values. And finally, a vast and terrific crash when the treacherous and unsustainable basis crumbles beneath the stupendous fabric of credit and the structure falls to the ground, burying in its ruins thousands who exulted in the fancied security of their elevation. Men nowadays go to bed deeming themselves rich, and wake in the morning to find themselves stripped of even the little they really had. This is getting a little too close for comfort, isn't it? They count, deluded creatures, on the continued liberality of the banks, whose persuasive entreaties seduce them into the slippery paths of speculation. So think here of house flipping in the housing bubble. But they have now to learn that the banks cannot help them if they would, and would not if they could. They were free enough to lend their aid when assistance is not needed, but now, when it is indispensable to carry out the projects which would not have been undertaken, but for the temptations they held forth, no further resources can be supplied. Now, quite interesting indeed. Now, it's also noteworthy that we see throughout the history of American panics and boom-bust cycles that people are always noticing that lending standards seem to decline during these periods. So this is, again, a misplaced emphasis right now. Everybody's saying it's Community Reinvestment Act and the federal government. Yes, it is, and that is definitely part of it. The federal government does seem to believe in the bread from stones philosophy of economics, that you can create nothing, you can create something out of nothing, and that wealth is a shortcut to wealth that does not involve saving, production, and entrepreneurial skill. But every time, think of the logic of it. When the Fed increases the supply of money, and it does so through the banking system, the banks now have more to lend. And given the incentive structure that exists in our banking system right now, they want to lend the maximum that they're allowed to lend. But now think of this analogy. Imagine I'm a basketball coach, and I'm suddenly told 10 minutes after I'm able to choose all my players, oh, by the way, we've changed the rules. You can choose 2 more players. Well, inevitably, I have to choose the additional players from a pool of people I had initially rejected. Same goes for lenders. Where are they going to get the additional people to lend this money to? From a pool of people they would otherwise have rejected. So naturally and inevitably the lending standards come down. So again, it becomes important to look at the root causes, not just look at the symptoms. We've had enough of that. We've had enough of thinking that maybe umbrellas are causing the rain. We have to look at the root causes of what's going on. I suggest to you that something is wrong with our money. Now, we're not supposed to say that. We're supposed to say the experts are in charge, they'll give us the best money they can give us, and sure, we have a Fed chairman who can create $2 trillion on a good afternoon, hand it out to people, and then not even have to tell us where it's going or what collateral he accepted. I mean, again, I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, that is an unbelievable abomination. There is nothing either conservative or progressive about that. And so that's why I'm so glad that H.R. 1207 is making its way through Congress to audit the federal reserve. congressman voting no on that? No, you know what? No, I think I want to have a secretive organization in charge of the money. I think that's what I want. No audit necessary. But something is wrong with the money. What we've seen, and what I hope I've at least made you think about in what I said about business cycle theory, is that artificially manipulated, unbacked paper money can give us boom and bust. And then when the bust comes, those major firms that have gone bust then turn to the paper money producer and ask for a bailout. And they usually get what they want. Now, is this so obviously the best conceivable system that all non-trivial alternatives are to be dismissed out of hand? And yet, do we even hear this subject even broached on CNBC or wherever other morons we're listening to, basically? I mean, boy, Jon Stewart really nailed CNBC. I mean, really, a dartboard would have been like 3 times as good as the advice you were getting there. And by the way, there goes my chance of ever being on CNBC. That's just out the window. But in any event, we're not hearing this. We're not hearing anything like this. All we're hearing is, we need more regulation. You know, we need the system as it is. Just a little more regulation. But again, I think that is just intellectual laziness of the most contemptible sort. Because as we're seeing, there are systematic, institutional factors that are leading to the unhappy outcomes we're witnessing. A little more regulation is totally beside the point. As long as you have a monopolistic paper money producer, you can try to fill up every hole with all your regulations you want to, but that money is going to find some outlet, and there's going to be some bubble somewhere else. We need to go to the root causes. Now, when it comes to regulation, typically, yeah, sure enough, if we could devise regulation that might be able to prevent this specific kind of meltdown occurring again. Wonderful. It's just like the TSA telling us to take our shoes off. There'll never be another shoe bomb. Okay? Yeah, okay, I agree. You've got a 100% chance there'll never be another shoe bomb. So if we ever have a time machine, we travel in it, we'll bring your technology and we'll catch the shoe bomb. And likewise, sure, you can devise something so that specifically Enron will never happen again. Or specifically this. Meanwhile, these things have terrible side effects, as Sarbanes-Oxley has had, making capital flee like there's no tomorrow from the United States. So again, we're not looking at the root causes. Where are these firms that they're leveraged up and they're making all these crazy things? Where are they getting access to all this cheap money? I mean, again, what are the root causes? And in terms of the mortgage market, well, that's very heavily regulated. And in fact, let's remember, the mortgage lenders were just doing what the government obviously wanted them to do. George W. Bush wanted to create an ownership society. This is a long-standing neoconservative policy goal. This is not a progressive thing, although there are progressives who agree with at least the principle of the idea. But this is a government policy. It was George W. Bush who said, we need to tax people so that we can take that money and make down payments for people. Because the down payment is sort of an archaic method of ascertaining credit, and so, we should just get rid of it. Whatever's standing in the way of everybody having his own home, we should just get rid of that. I won't even get into, you should listen to Peter Schiff on why it makes more sense to rent half the time. You have none of the headaches. Give the landlord all the headaches. You just enjoy the pleasure of living there, for goodness sake. You are not throwing your money out the window by any means doing that. Okay. I wish I had a glass of water. Is this for me? Oh, good. I was hoping you could see it. Okay. Oh, 2 more. Well, I'm not planning to go on that much longer, so pardon me. Okay, good. All right. Let me start sort of wrapping things up there. I think I've condemned the Fed sufficiently. I do want to say, by the way, one last thing about the mortgage market is that there were regulators looking at it. The Fed's regulators. Ben Bernanke, our Fed chairman, told us around late 2006 that his regulators had investigated the mortgage market and found it was in better shape than ever. So they're the experts again. So again, we have to trust regulators for our well-being. I mean, we had some. So you're going to tell me that we're going to be able to find regulators who are going to have the backbone to stand up and tell the federal government the opposite of what it obviously wants to hear, which is that the mortgage market is in great shape. You're telling me we have to rely for our prosperity on the backbone of a few regulators who are going to have the courage to stand up against the entire federal government, all of academia, and all of the media. Well, you know what? I think I need maybe a firmer foundation for American prosperity. We should demand more. Now, as we observe what the federal government is doing, it is, of course, doing exactly the opposite of what it should be doing. I mean, every single time, without fail, it does exactly the opposite of what it should do. And now the opposition party, such as it is, has sometimes been better than it has been over the years, although what credibility the opposition party would have on fiscal responsibility is totally beyond me. I've had people say, what are you? Why weren't you criticizing George W. Bush? I was. That's all I've done for years, right? And it was like my whole career was criticizing this. I almost don't know what to do with myself. I have to keep erasing Bush and typing in Obama. However, the criticisms are still the same. You're still a warmonger. You're still against civil liberties. You're still for the drug war. You're still basically the same guy, except you give better speeches. Now, all to say, but when I say the opposition party, though, some of them have been sort of okay on this. But others, their response is to say, well, if our party had drafted the stimulus bill, we would have blown the $800 billion on different things. I think that's not really the point. Because consider what Austrian business cycle theory implicitly suggests needs to be done during the downturn phase. Now, strictly speaking, I'm not talking about the genuine pain that real human beings are enduring right now because of what the Fed has done to us. I'm not in any way disparaging them. But when I say to you that the recession or downturn phase is actually the restoration of health to the economy, I mean this in a macro sense. What I mean is that it is actually during the boom phase that the damage is done. Because it's during the boom phase that the master builder of our analogy is building a house he can't possibly finish. And therefore he is squandering our wealth and making us all the poorer. It is during the boom phase that investors are engaged in projects for which there is insufficient demand and for which the necessary resources do not exist. They are squandering resources and making us poorer. That's where the damage is done. The recession is the phase in which the economy tries, against every effort of government, to sort this out. To stop and say, all right, we have got investment lines that make no sense. We have to sort out which of these projects is sustainable and rational, and which of these projects is just a bubble project that can persist profitably only so long as the monetary spigot is unleashed. And as I've said, it is a bad thing for genuine wealth generators to have to compete with activities that can exist only so long as artificial money is pumped in. That is bad. That makes us poorer. We should want those businesses to go out of business. If people are now deciding, hey, I'm not as rich as I thought I was, I don't want that $7 ice cream cone anymore, if Cold Stone Creamery starts closing some shops, that is a good thing because that was a squandering of resources in the first place. We are poorer if we prop them up. We don't want to. That just sucks more resources into them. And I don't mean to single them out. If some of you work for that company, I'm sure they make wonderful friends. Not the point. But that's what the economy is trying to do. It is trying to reprice assets. It's trying to reprice all kinds of consumer and capital goods to figure out what's profitable, what isn't, liquidate what's unprofitable, and shift those resources into producing things that people want, that are sustainable. So you don't prop up failing firms. You let them go. Because all you're doing is sucking wealth that is necessary for the wealth-generating sectors of the economy. You certainly do not interfere with wages and prices. They need to fluctuate. Wages may need to come down in some places because we've overproduced there. We don't need that many people working there anymore, and we need to reallocate labor elsewhere. Maybe wages need to go up someplace else because we've artificially starved this industry in the meanwhile. These things need to be allowed to proceed through the natural nexus of voluntary exchange of buyers and sellers, figuring out where this all should settle out.